Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy podcast. This is episode 165. What is choral music? What is it not? Is choral music essential? Or is it just one in a heap of educational options or music education options? It's been a while since I've done an episode that is explicitly choral music advocacy. We did some early on in the podcast feed, but I thought this would be a good occasion to do another one. So in this episode, I draw on a few sources, including audience comments, to present an advocacy conversation, to make the case for choral music specifically in classrooms, infrastructure support, and educational priorities. You will see or hear, depending on if you're watching on YouTube or listening, a video I made all the way back in 2012 in response to the popular TV show Glee, which I saw at the time as being a little bit harmful to our reputation in the sense that it did not present choral music classrooms accurately, as well as a video I made in late summer of 2020 arguing that my choral classroom was an essential service to my students. You also hear portions of a live stream that I did recently in the Choralosophers Facebook page, as well as some audience thoughts about the question, what is choral music? Attention performing arts directors. Are you looking for a platform that understands your unique needs? Look no further than ludus.com. Built from the ground up for the performing arts by people from the arts, Ludus is the perfect solution for your organization. With Ludus, you can drive revenue with ticket sales, merchandise, and fundraising, all while saving time, money, and resources. And the best part? It's 100% free to your program. Sign up for Ludus today and take your performing arts program to the next level. Choralosophy listeners can go to ludus.com/choralosophy for an upgrade for free to their marketing suite. Sight Reading Factory. You've got to get signed up for you and your kids, and don't forget to use that Choralosophy checkout code. There are other codes that you could use, but it helps this show when you use the Choralosophy checkout code. The Choralosophy podcast continues to be free, and I'm working hard every week to provide this free content, but some of you, many of you, have decided, hey, I want to chip in financially to help make sure that the expenses of this show are covered, and just to say thank you to Chris for doing all of this stuff. If that's you, you can go to patreon.com/choralosophy and sign up for as little as $3 a month. There are, of course, various levels that you can join, and at the producer or above level, we have Brian Long, Chandler Smith, Venture Studios, John Warner, Jonah Clixbull, Ulrika Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Angie Schilling, Carlos, David Kowalczyk, James Mock, Jared Hendricks, Kyle Peterson, Max Jackson, Michael Herron, Nathan Hines, Ryan Main, and Stephen Kathy Kakachik. Head to patreon.com/choralosophy and join the crowd. So first, enjoy this video I made in 2012. Pardon the belching noises. I made this video with zero intention that anyone would ever hear it, and now I am playing it for you, for thousands of people, and I had discovered that the platform I used to make the video had a belching button, and I was having a little bit of fun with that. It means nothing. Don't read anything into it. Enjoy.
So, you were a choir teacher?
Yes. I teach choral music.
Is that like Glee?
Many schools across the country have Glee clubs, yes.
I love the TV show, Glee.
No, the TV show Glee has nothing to do with Glee clubs. The TV show, Glee, represents horribly inappropriate show choirs. Glee clubs are single-gender large choral ensembles that sing complicated four-part harmonies while standing still. Harvard Glee Club is a famous example.
Then why is the show called Glee?
That is an excellent question.
So what kinds of things do you do in class?
I may teach the broadest curriculum of any academic subject in school. We study languages, diction, history, music theory, cultural interactions, and on and on.
Subject? I thought choir was an activity, like football. How is choir academic?
You can get a PhD in choral music. You cannot get a PhD in football. Choral music is one of the most complex art forms, while simultaneously serving as a vessel for some of the world's greatest poets, authors, and religious thinkers.
You should form a choir with all of the winners of American Idol. I bet that would be a great choir. You could probably make a lot of money.
I probably could make some money, but most of the people on American Idol would not make my high school chamber choir if they auditioned.
That makes no sense. They are the best singers in the world.
No. They are not. Many young singers involved in private study that develop a control over their vocal instrument that is unmatched by most pop singers. This technique develops into ninja-like control and accuracy after years of training. Choral singers must develop better technique than almost any other vocal genre. They do not have the advantage of microphones or digital mixing boards to make them sound better. They also must have the ability to listen and adjust the pitch of their voice by tiny fractions of a semitone. Again, without the aid of a digital tuner.
I did not know any of that. I did not know that there were choir ninjas.
I know you didn't. Not many people do. I know many choir ninjas.
I am not in high school anymore, but I am interested in singing in a choir. It is probably too late. I want to be a ninja.
No. Almost every town in America has choral singing opportunities, ranging from church choirs to community choirs. Many major cities even have professional choirs.
I will have to assess the opportunities to both perform and support choral music in my hometown. It seems like it could be quite interesting.
You do that. It was nice talking with you.
So I can't prove this, but I actually believe that Ryan Guth, the godfather of choral podcasters, had the Choir Ninja podcast, and I am pretty sure he stole that name from that video and did not give me credit, but I have no way to prove that. You can find the video also, if you'd like to share it with your friends, in the show notes. In 2020, I was very concerned that the essential service that I provide, which is choral music education, had been taken away for extended periods of time from students who I really knew needed what we do in class. And I knew that the online solution they were offered was not going to cut it. I also knew what was coming, which is that when you take something that is so vital and life-giving away from young people in the most vulnerable time of their lives, there would be negative consequences. Looking back on 2020, I can now see, unfortunately, that I was right. Here's a little clip of that video. The full version of this video is in the show notes.
I teach students to believe in themselves, to believe in each other. The way I do this is by teaching them to conquer one of their greatest fears, their own voice. They learn to trust each other with their voices. This year to date, I have been able to see my students in person 12 times. As a result, they have not had the time to discover what I already know about them, that their voices are worthy and their voices are powerful. My expertise is helping them uncover their hidden strength, but this takes time. It takes hundreds of failures and recoveries, dusting themselves off, trying again, failing in public, but realizing that life will go on, realizing that their classmates have their back. Eventually, the fear of their own voice fades. All that is left is their power. That hurdle is one of the most important leaps that a young human must make, and possibly the most important skill taught in school. This school year has robbed them of this. Doing a school online disrupts the feedback loops that make up real education. What is normally a process of hundreds of these loops per day has been reduced to the snail's pace of high-speed internet. They can ask me questions in class where my one answer benefits everyone. Now I have to send the same email 200 times. In class, I can give them the feedback, both verbal and nonverbal, in real time, while they are working, during the attempt, causing the learning to accelerate as they attempt, as they fail, and as they succeed. My feedback is coming at them with my body language. Online, they must attempt with no guidance, send me a sample of their work, and then wait till the next day for feedback. That's one feedback loop. And it took a whole day. And that's in a class where they are lucky enough to have their work not being graded by a computer. So we teachers are working our butts off. This message cannot be interpreted as anti-teacher. We are spending more of our free time than ever before designing curriculum from scratch, new assessments, and lessons that can be delivered online. What has that work gotten us? An all-time high failing grade rate, kids are dropping out of school, taking psych meds for the first time, attempting suicide, generally disengaging with the educational process. I've been teaching students for 18 years, And I've seen more of all of those things this year in 2020 than in the whole of my teaching career combined.
So, as you can hear there, I was a little bit worked up making that video. That went out on my personal YouTube channel in my own kind of capacity as a teacher in the community that I live and as a parent in the community that I live. The rest of that video is also in the show notes, and I go on to talk a little bit more about some of the things that I learned from COVID experts related to this topic of school opening versus school closure here on the show. So I'll let you check that out if you're interested. I'm now going to bring you into a portion of the live stream that happened in the Choralosophers Facebook page over Labor Day weekend. I should have known better than to try to do a live stream on a holiday weekend on a Saturday afternoon when a lot of people are probably doing way more fun things. But I think a lot of really good stuff happened there. And so I clipped out some relevant portions here for you. And then the folks over on the Patreon page are going to get the full stream. So I'm going to be posting that very soon as the Patreon-only episode that you can hear if you are a subscriber over there on patreon.com/Choralosophy. But in this live stream, we talked about some of the issues related to what the Choralosophy podcast is in its mission. And since choral music is my passion and my advocacy, this show has taken on a lot of really interesting forms related to the advocacy for choral music. I would say due to the size of the audience here and the reach beyond the specific choral music nerd that this show has been able to achieve, I think we're doing some pretty important work here related to getting people who don't already love choral music to see its value. Even if they only see its educational value for kids, and they didn't before, I would say the attention this show gets from non-musicians is a win-win for all of us. And of course, I rely on your help to continue to spread the word about that. So here is a portion of that live stream from Labor Day weekend. Other exciting things. So the Substack newsletter is off to a really good start. I am really happy with that switch. I had been sending the newsletter out via MailChimp, but Substack is just a little bit more user-friendly, and it gives me a lot better feedback, just in my opinion. Maybe it's just a personal preference, but I've just loved how much data it shows me about how the show is being received and also how the newsletter is being received. So I can see who's accessing it. Well, not specifically who, but I can see how many people are accessing it in a very easy, user-friendly way. And so that most recent one just went out right before I went live here. So the September newsletter is out on Substack. So other exciting things we've been doing lately, we're gearing up for the 5-year anniversary of the show. So February of 2024 will be 5 years. And so I've got some plans for how we're going to create content related to that 5-year anniversary, but also ways for us to use your feedback as part of that 5-year celebration. So we've got a Google Doc going. Anna, my social media wonderful graphics person, that all the posts and the memes that you see from Choralosophy Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, Anna Messenger creates those. She does a wonderful job. Shout out to Anna. We're going to be making some graphics, and then when we get to that 5-year anniversary, we're going to create a Choralosophy Impact page on the website where we can just collect some testimonials. If you'd like to be a part of that, then you can send those quotes to choralosophy@gmail.com, or you can just drop them in the Apple Podcast app review area. That's also very helpful to leave ratings there, to leave comments. But I'm actually going to go into my little archive now of Choralosophy Impact quotes and share one of these. This is one of my favorite ones. Okay, so this is a quote that you're going to be seeing on on some of these posts. You can add yours to this list too, but this person has given me permission to use this quote, and I personally found this very gratifying to hear. While the primary focus of each episode is obviously choral music, it's also apparent that Chris is genuinely interested in a wide variety of disciplines. As a listener, what I enjoy most about the Choralosophy podcast is his uncanny ability to find unique connections from non-music conversational side notes to our art form. The Choralosophy podcast is the ultimate online source for interdisciplinary discussion geared towards choir directors. And that's Gary Safeman. Thanks, Gary. I appreciate that comment. That means a lot to hear because that is exactly what we're going for here. And let me tell you a little story about how that evolved. So when I started the show in 2019, I really did, in my mind at that time, plan to make a mostly nuts and bolts choral professional development specifically geared towards choir directors to become better choir directors. That was the original idea. And I was, of course, the reason there's the philosophy part of the word in that choralosophy is that I was planning as part of that into talking a lot about why we teach and why we teach the way we teach. And that was definitely going to be part of it from the very beginning. But what I noticed early on was that it just was really too hard for me to ignore. I have this microphone in front of me in studio in my house, and to see the things that were going on in the world, especially as 2020 rolled around, and just to not talk about those things and pretend like they're not there. A relationship had already been established at that point with the audience, and I decided that I'm going to have conversations about whatever interests me from the perspective of a choral director, because we live in the world in the same way that everyone else does. Our students come to us from the world the same way everybody else's kids do. So the idea that a topic related to, I don't know, human psychology, or the very nature of how we conceive of human sexuality, sex differences between males and females, issues of trans rights, racism, things related to the way we teach history. All of those things. Yes, we've talked about all that stuff on this show. And sometimes people will say, well, what does this have to do with teaching choir? And I say, you must be new here, because this is what we talk about. The reason it has to do with teaching choir is because, and this is just my opinion, is that I believe that when we walk into our classrooms as fully integrated humans that are fully integrated humans, in that we are citizens of the world, we are observant humans, we are part of a conversation that is broader than just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and hearing pitch in your head and learning to sing with a relaxed larynx and all the things that we teach, which are super important. And of course, I've gone out on many a limb to talk about how crucial that is for us as music educators to do and to be good at. But that's not all there is. And so what choralosophy really wants to be, I think, in year 6 through 10, is to be a place where we can have conversations about really whatever we want to, but with that perspective of becoming fully integrated human beings, that by getting to that place makes us better teachers. And of course, we talked last time we did a live stream. We talked quite a bit about the teacher burnout aspect of things, and I think that this is related to that too. A lot of times, our dismay about the world in general can come into our classrooms and color the experience that we have there with our students and with ourselves. The type of feedback that I've gotten that is unique to in-person feedback, and I would say this type of feedback started in 2021 when we did the Choralosophicon convention in Atlanta. It was like, everything had been shut down, and it was one of the first things that I had seen people in person since doing a lot of those early popular episodes on the show. The feedback that I get online a lot of times is stuff that I just described. People asking questions about the nitty-gritty of the music literacy ideas. But in person, what I got a lot was, thank you for having conversations like all the other ones, like the psychology conversations, the social justice conversations, the conversations that are really kind of dangerous conversations that nobody else wants to have in our music education space. They're the types of conversations where you just won't see them happen at a convention. You just won't see it. and if you did see it, you would know what the answers were before you walked in. So if they were asking a question about some of these hot button issues like race and gender and different types of things, you are pretty well guaranteed that you know what the perspective of the presenter will be prior to that conversation starting. And what people are thanking me for in person is that these conversations that we're doing here are, number one, different, so they're thought-provoking. But number two, that they are trying to explore the range of what is possibly true without the dogma, without the buzzwords. I saw a great quote the other day where if you're speaking in buzzwords, then you're not speaking in your own words. If you're not speaking in your own words, you're not thinking. And I really resonated with that because I think it is really crucially true. It's profoundly true that if the way you speak about a topic is being taken from vocabulary words you saw on an Instagram post, or whatever, then it's very difficult to feel like you're authentically having that conversation. And so what I think people are resonating with is that they are tuning into episodes on this show, and they are they're feeling like they're hearing real conversations between two people that are sharing what they really think. And of course, I self-censor sometimes when I'm on the air. There are certain types of things that I might a guest, for example, might say something I disagree with, and sometimes I'll push back. But sometimes I think in my head, that's not really worth it. It's okay for them to just have their perspective and put their perspective out there, and I don't have to push back against everything. That could start a whole different podcast episode if I went off in on that tangent, right? And so but beyond that, it's a pretty authentic conversation happening, and I think that's where people are finding their joy. They're coming back, that's happening with the show. I'm really honored. I'm flattered. I'm loving doing this with you all. So in summary so far, what I'm essentially trying to present with this episode is that anything that is related to us being human and more fully human, and as choral musicians being pro-human, is related to teaching choir. That is the operating policy here at the Choralosophy podcast. Teaching choir is more than just teaching notes and rhythms. It's more than teaching vocal pedagogy, despite the fact that I have been loudly annoying probably to many people about how we're not spending enough time talking about those things. It is actually true, of course, that teaching choir and choral music itself is about lots of things. So I'm going to go now into a Choralosophers Facebook page post in which I asked some of these prompting questions for comments. And of course here I didn't get permission to use names, so I won't use the names. I will simply read out and discuss some of the comments. So what is choral music? What is it not? Is there any part of music or aspects of music that should be excluded from that category? Does the category even matter? These are the types of questions that I'm trying to pull out of folks, and here are some of the answers. So first I'll start with my answer to this essential question, I guess you could say, which is choral music. What is it? How would you define it? And to me, it is nothing less or nothing more than music that is written for, originally, or arranged for a choir. Now, an astute person on the thread pretty quickly pointed out, well, wouldn't you then have to define a choir? Which I've also done several posts on that. How do we define a choir, right? And I agree. I'm intentionally leaving that a little bit opaque in my answer, a little bit broad, because I recognize from past, I guess, research online that lots of people disagree about what it takes to make a choir, what constitutes a choir. So for me, the definition of choral music has a little bit of that ambiguity in it also, but with some clear lines drawn around the idea that the music is conceived of to be sung together by multiple people, and if it wasn't originally conceived to be sung together by a group of people, that someone has sat down and taken the time to reconstruct it, reimagine it in such a way through an arrangement that a choir would be successful, happy, and healthy, so to speak, singing. Now, not all music lends itself really well to becoming choral music. So there are the obvious things like, I don't know, something that doesn't have a melody would be difficult to become choral music because it would be hard to sing. So taking a snare drum solo and arranging it for choir would be difficult. Not impossible necessarily, I'm not going to go there, but it would be difficult because there's nothing that would be inherent to the singer. So for example, another one, take it to a culture from a different place in the world, like you have a gamelan ensemble, right? Also percussion. There are pitches, yes, sure. But I would argue that as soon as you took that music and tried to arrange it for a choir, it would stop sounding like a gamelan real fast, and it would become something else, right? Nothing wrong with that per se, but it would not be inherently choral music because it was written for percussion. So I don't mean to throw shade in my definition here at percussionists. That's just an example of music that would be very difficult to translate. So then in my further questions on the Facebook post, which you can still find on there, it's on the Choralosophy Podcast Facebook page. That's just kind of the main public page for the podcast. There were more questions. So I asked for people's thoughts, and I said, what is choral music, but then also what isn't? What doesn't fall into that category? So as I just gave my opinion, which is essentially that if it's written for, arranged for groups of people to sing together, then we can call it choral music. And so I've got first person that chimed in actually wrote a bit of an essay, but I'm going to read some excerpts from it. It was a really, really good thought. And he said, a pop song sung in unison by a chorus of multiple singers is not choral music, nor, according to this narrow definition, is that same pop song sung in simple four-part harmony by the same chorus of singers. And yet it is not the pop genre that excludes it from being choral music. Should that pop song be transformed into something intentionally in the lineage of choral tradition in an academic approach to its arrangement with the intent to elevate it beyond the common, then it would become choral music, according to this poster. Similarly, just because Mendelssohn or Schubert wrote something for Liedertafel doesn't make it inherently choral because they are trained composers. So I think that's a really, really good point. And so here's how I would frame that. I've had actually some debates, friendly debates, of course, that's what we do here on the show years ago now, where I spoke with a guest about the idea that not all cultures, for example, have choral music as their medium of expression that is native or even relevant to their culture, and so a lot of their music also might fall into a category that isn't super easy to translate over, almost as if the medium itself would create a challenge. And then there's also in a similar vein, if we're talking about music from different cultures being transcribed and turned into choral music, is of course the fine line of when does it stop being authentic. And there's a lot of music, and this person uses the example of pop music, but I would agree with that. Like pop music, certain types of blues and jazz, as soon as we start to academicize it for a choral setting, we have already robbed it of its authenticity. So we have to kind of swallow that bitter pill. In other words, there isn't an authentic arrangement of a blues ballad for choir. There just isn't. And there would probably be people who disagree, but I would argue that it's impossible categorically to do that. Not that it's bad, not that it's bad to do that, to attempt to do that, but I think it's impossible because once it starts being sung by a choir, it's no longer an authentic blues expression in that idiom, in that genre. So I think the reason this is an important question to ask is because we are being frequently told that our curricula needs to expand beyond the traditional Western canon. I'm like, yes, sure, but it doesn't have to expand beyond choral music. Choral music has a much broader definition than traditional Western canon. Right? It's the canon itself that we're trying to expand. We're not trying to abandon the canon. We have an episode with that title, in fact, Don't Abandon the Canon. We just want to expand the canon. Okay, so this is actually from that same poster, I'm going to read another another paragraph here, because he wrote a lot. It was really good. I suggest you go read the whole thing. How does this all matter? So why are we talking about this? It matters because based on our educational values, and I don't think they need to be mutually exclusive, but we ought not to deceive ourselves that they are the same. Thus, the question of vocal music versus choral music curriculum is not mutually exclusive, but sometimes the concept of all things are lawful but not all things are expedient is helpful. As a young piano student, I would have loved for my teacher to assign me piano arrangements of popular music, but they only assigned classical repertoire. Does that mean they had a literature curriculum instead of a piano curriculum? Absolutely not. They could have assigned pop arrangements, but they knew that the classical literature they assigned would offer the broadest and richest exposure to the techniques I ought to study and master, and that, by those mastered techniques, I would be able to apply them in my recreational playing. Is there not far more to learn in one two-part invention by Bach than in a two-page arrangement of Hey Jude? And this is again really well thought out, and that's an excellent point, because I agree. Yes, there is and here's how I would argue it. If you are a musician, a trained musician, who can't tell that there's more going on in a two-part Bach invention or one of his little fugues than in an entire Beatles album, for that matter. And the Beatles are fantastic, but there are some core fundamental principles of the way music is constructed by nature that Bach understood and mastered that the Beatles just don't think about. I mean, they were busy being high for a good portion of the time that they wrote music, which is why it's so awesome. But also, they're not thinking on the same level as Bach. And that is not the same. So this is kind of following up last week's episode. Is Taylor Swift better than Beethoven? It's not the same as saying that Bach is better than the Beatles. They are doing different things for different reasons in different times and places. It's like comparing apples to oranges. I actually don't think it's the right question. The right question is, what could we be pulling out of that Bach repertoire? And in our classrooms and our schools, is the focus the academic kind of what the nuggets, so to speak, that we can dig out intellectually, in addition to all of the spiritual, I guess, touchy-feely things that we want our choir kids to experience. So I think it's both of those things. And so these are some really good thoughts that get drawn into some of these Choralosophy post conversations, which I just love. It's my favorite part about the job, is when I can finally get you guys to talk back to me. I turn on this microphone every week and I talk, and sometimes, most of the time, of course, there's a guest. That's one person, but I really want you guys to talk too, so thank you to all these people. Here's another response. What is choral music? Choral music is the pinnacle of the art of music. The best works, and these best in quotes, works of the best, in quotes again, composers are for the voice. Many instruments are designed to mimic the voice, more so than nearly all other musical art forms. Choral music can tap into the innate mathematical and spiritual beauty inherent in the overtone series. It isn't just music arranged for a choir, it's the epitome of what music can be. So I think what he's trying to make an argument, I don't want to put words in this person's mouth, but it seems like he's trying to make almost like a superiority of the art form type of an argument based on the idea that the human voice is the original voice. It's the original instrument, sorry. It's the original instrument on which all other instruments were created in response to what the human voice could do. And I actually am sympathetic to that argument, in that I also agree that the human voice is a wind instrument, we're a string instrument, we're a percussion instrument, and so much more with the emotion connected to that. It's really, really difficult to make an argument, in my opinion, that there is a single instrument that is better at doing lots of things, right? So again, what's in my rubric for what better means might be different than what your rubric is, and that's okay. All of your rubrics are welcome here on Choralosophy. The one thing that I would just maybe quibble with a little bit is I don't know that choral music is necessarily the epitome of what music can be. I just think that it's the pinnacle of what the intersection between music and common humanity and community can be, because it's hard for me to write off like just a brilliant concert pianist who is mastered the heart and the body playing. That's one of the most breathtaking musical things you can ever watch is that, or even just a virtuosic soloist of any of any type. I think those things are epitomes also, but if we marry that virtuosity with community and love and connection, then we get to choral music, which is that's the epitome, but it's more than just the music. I hope that makes sense, at least how I would respond to that person. One of the reasons I can't type out all this stuff on Facebook. This would take forever, right? Another one. The voice is the original instrument, unique to the anatomy and soul of each individual. Even with vowel uniformity, each choral ensemble has a life and sound that is very unique. Choral composers have to carefully choose or write the text where the vowels and syntax are complementary to the instrument. Directors get to choose how to interpret and deliver this text. It's beautiful. I agree. That's fantastic. Choralosophy listeners are so smart. This is why we call you Choralosophers. So go join the Facebook page if you're not already. Choralosophers on Facebook. It's a private group. We can have more of these conversations. Okay, good. Going on. The combination of voices singing together is greater than the summation of all the individual voices. Clap, clap, clap. There is something unique and beautiful created in the art of singing together, something that only happens in choral music. And I would agree if we're saying something that only happens in choral music, as distinct from just like we're sitting in a park strumming on a guitar and singing Kumbaya and whatever comes out comes out. Because I would actually not call that choral music. To me, there has to be some type of an intentionality into a we conversation about, in order for it to be choral music, we need there to be some type of a we, in air quotes, we intentionality about what this will sound like when we're done. It can't just be I sing and you sing and we all sing at the same time and then at the end we walk away and we just did choral music. That's group singing, but I think we don't get to use that special, beautiful, essential label of choral music until we do that. And so if this person is saying there is something unique and beautiful created in the art of singing together, when we cross over into creating art together, then yes, that only happens in choral music. So that's wonderful. Now another person said, I mean, by definition, sure, but it is also a collaboration of unique human voices to inspire through a careful organization of notes and rhythms to convey a message from inspiring text. So this person was quibbling a little bit with my definition of choral music, which is fine. And actually, I agreed with that. I just had chosen to use fewer words to inspire you all to write more words. Because if I use a lot of words, then you're less likely to add your own. At least I find that that's how the social media algorithm works. And then another person came into that thread and said, actually, I would say text is not even necessary. And I would agree with that. You can do a beautiful vocalese, for example, on choir, with a choir. That's no text at all, just vowel sounds and consonant sounds, written, again, intentionally. We're trying to sound a certain way when we do it. It becomes choral music. And then we have somebody who wanted to play Grammar Police just a little bit, and that's fine. I'm teasing. It's a great comment. Said saying choral music is for choir is redundant. And I addressed that when we started. But my 8th grade English teacher would put a big red mark on it with a note and say, try again. So this person is just making sure that we don't try to define a term with a term, right? And I get it. I don't want to do that either. But again, I'm leaving it open-ended, so hopefully to ask people to chime in. Now, I will say, so a second ago, I talked about how we're sitting down in a park and a bunch of people sit down together and we just all start singing spontaneously. I don't call that a choir because it lacks the intentionality and it lacks a decision, corporate or otherwise, of what this will sound like when we are done. And so to me, that implies that there is some type of a rehearsal before we get to become a choir. So that leads me to the next comment here. Somebody said that a choir is actually just two people or more singing together. And again, my definition, I would disagree. So I dropped a video link of Luther Vandross and Mariah Carey singing Endless Love, classic ballad duet from my era. And I said, well, isn't this a duet? It's two people singing together, but I would say it's not a choir. And he said, actually, it is a choir. And I said, okay, I disagree. And part of that is because they are soloists singing on the same song, right? It's a duet. So they are not, and this is, again, I'll keep adding this disclaimer. because I'm saying it's not choral music, I am not saying that this Luther Vandross and Mariah Carey duet is not fire emojis, because it's awesome. It's one of my favorite. I used to listen to this duet over and over and over and over. I could sing both parts, and I loved it when I was a kid. I loved this song. In fact, I begged every attractive girl in my middle school and high school to sing this duet with me, and I only got one person to sing it with me, and she was adorable and really attractive. But that was it. I was such a nerd. This was the wrong way to impress a girl. And so, but it's not choral music. And the reason I would say that is because when Luther sings in that song, he is just trying to sound like Luther. And when Mariah sings, she's just singing like Mariah, and they aren't making an attempt to unify their sound into one sound, because they are singing as if they are soloists. Okay, so I think to choral music, again, there has to be a little bit of give and take between the singers about what we want it to sound like. It can't be just, I'm going to sing with my voice and you're going to sing with your voice, and I'm going to do my thing and you do your thing. I would then call that a duet, and that's fine if we want to have tiny choirs. Now, you could have a choir of two, I think, if you're singing unison, and or a two-part piece where you are making those intentional decisions about how we want it to work together. And then there might be certain decisions you'd make about how your voice sounds differently based on who you're singing with. Who with you are singing, because I don't want to end with a preposition. Okay, good. So in this conversation, I guess the reason I framed this originally as, and those are all great comments, and there's a few more little sub-comments you can go and find. You can still add your own. I would still like to hear, in fact, I would love to hear more of your thoughts about what I just talked about, but also what any of the other folks here did. Because I teach at my school, in the choir classes that we have 6 choirs at our school, and they are choral curriculums. They are unapologetically choral curriculums. They're not vocal music curriculums. We are not trying to teach kids to sing in all kinds of ways, air quotes. We're trying to get really darn good at singing in a choir. That's it. That's what we're trying to do. Now, we're trying to do that in as broad of a based music education as possible. So I'm teaching them as much music theory as I can. I'm teaching them as much functional voice technique as I can. I'm teaching them music literacy, as you all know. I'm teaching them a broad spectrum of what they can learn about music, but the medium that I go to them through is choir. So I will correct other teachers in my building if they say, my kid has, or this kid has vocal music next in third period. It's like, no, we don't have vocal music. We have choral music. We have a choir class. This is a choir class. And so if a kid asks me, are we going to sing any, heavy metal or whatever? Like, no, because it doesn't really translate very well to a choir. Or are we going to sing, are we going to have like and nobody asks me this. This is just hypothetical. Are we going to have everybody gets to sing their favorite pop song unit in the choir class? No. And again, another disclaimer. If you do that in your classroom, that's fine. That is absolutely fine. Because, again, and we'll just call this a sequel to episode 164. You should go back. Stephen Cox and I talked a lot about this. And to make it super perfectly clear, I did not interpret Stephen's message as being that me having a choral program and thinking of it as a choral program is bad. I don't think he was saying that at all. But that sentiment is out there. That sentiment that choral music is too restrictive. We should really be teaching kids just any type of singing that they want. And that's fine if it works for you. My frustration, I guess, in the choral music classroom advocacy space is that we do, kind of like Stephen and I talked about, have to fight for resources. We have to fight for time with the kids. And time and money, ultimately, is what gets in the way of most of our abilities to teach our kids to do amazing things. Now, teaching technique and understanding of concepts also does get in the way for teachers. Burnout gets in the way. All those things get in the way. But time and money really do get in the way of our ability to teach those things. And something I've just always been frustrated with the way we talk to each other about our art form is that we all have limited time and resources. So we are all making choices. And we have to make choices of what we exclude from the classroom. And where we'll get into trouble is we will have people who will use that as evidence that you're just not quite inclusive enough because of what you excluded. And then, of course, That same person who accuses you of being too exclusionary because of you have to exclude things, they're not going to offer up their curriculum and post it on Facebook so we can pick at the things that they excluded. Because we could. And the reason I know we could is because everybody's got finite time and resources. So everybody's excluding. We can have as many conventions at ACDA about inclusion as we want. That will not stop the fact that we cannot stop excluding. I know. Who is this guy on a podcast saying these horrible things that no one's allowed to say? We will never, I say it again, we will never be able to stop excluding because we live on a finite planet for a finite amount of time. So what we have to get better at is we have to get better at making the choices that will impact the larger numbers of kids the most. Okay? So for me, because of my talents, the things I'm good at and the things that I'm able to communicate and teach kids to high proficiency, I'm going to do a choral music program because I'm good at that. And because when kids come into my classroom, I'm good at making them good at that also. Okay? So that's where I'm going to spend my time and energy. It's going to be a choral music curriculum. And this is why I have zero judgment towards you in your classroom if you stop and do a solo voice unit or whatever, or a solo pop songs unit. That's awesome. If that fits your skill set, and maybe you've got accompaniment, improvisatory skills at the keyboard, and you could do a unit where all of your kids pick their favorite pop song and they start to learn it, and you use that to teach vocal technique and breathing and resonance and all that stuff, and then you sit and play along with them on the piano and high five them afterwards, and they're having a lot of fun probably and being engaged in a very different way than my kids are, because my kids don't get that. Right? So I'm excluding that because I wouldn't be good at that. I would not be good at it. I would suck at it. I would be stupid playing the piano, number one. And it's not my expertise of that style of music. And because I have finite time and resources, I'm going to spend the 43 or 44 minutes that I get to see the kids every day working in the wheelhouse that has worked for large numbers of kids across my program for many, many years and across the district that I teach in. So ultimately, there's a little bit of a tangent to this conversation, right? So if you're going to start by saying, what is choral music? Well, then, I'm not going to rehash that. Please go back and listen or add your definitions in that Facebook post. What is choral music? What is it not? And then the tangent from that is if there's music that's not choral music, is it okay? Can we wrap our lips around the bitter pill that it's okay to exclude it from a classroom that is set up for choral music? And we're ooh, our skin's itching because our skin is itching because we don't like to think about it being okay that we exclude anything, right? I get it. But can we swallow that bitter pill? That if that's not what our class is about, it's okay that we don't teach it in that class. Because I'll give you a hint, all of our other colleagues in education do this all the time. They decide, if it's the history of Western civilization, well, of course, they're excluding the East, right? Should we not have history of Western Civ? I would say, of course we should. We should also have other histories from other parts of the world. But if you've got a class that's Western Civ, then you're going to talk about Western stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're going to do a choral music curriculum, then teach choral music. If you're going to do a vocal music curriculum, there's nothing wrong with that. And then your approach might be that you have a choir unit, but you also have like I said, a pop music unit, pop music solo unit. And then maybe you have a unit on certain other vocal styles. And you had, now I would say that if you choose to go about it that way, your choir, when you do a choir, won't be very good. It won't be very good because singing in a choir is very specific type of singing, just like those other types of singing are. But again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you choose, if your approach philosophically is, I want to give my kids a taste of a lot of different types of singing in this class, I cheer you on. What I don't want is for you to come onto my post and say how I should teach my class, because that's not what I'm going to do to you. I'm going to teach you here. The things that I know about how to teach a choir class, but also how to think about philosophy and all the other things that I've studied in my life. So I think ultimately these tangents of what type of curriculum are we choosing, what type of music are we focusing on, what medium is the music that we are focusing on, are really, really important conversations. They're important conversations about which there are many correct answers. I would say there are probably some wrong answers here too, but I would say I would be more focused on the fact that there are a lot of right answers. So I hope this was thought-provoking for you. I hope this was not too triggering for anyone, but my job here is to stir up conversation and to stir up your thoughts about what you do and why you do it. So I would love to hear from some of you who maybe have a very different model than I do and why it works for you. And I would be very interested to hear why you chose it and why you stick with it, especially if you have a little bit more of a jack-of-all-trades approach to your class. And I would love to hear about that. Of course, the way you can help the most, if you're a listener of this show on a regular basis, is use the promo codes. And that just means entering Choralosophy at checkout at sightreadingfactory.com, graphitepublishing.com, endeavormusicpublishing.com, mymusicfolders.com, and choralosophy.com/voce-vista. All of these links are in the show notes every week for these episodes. When you use that promo code, it directly helps me. It shows those advertisers that you're listening and helps me stay in business. Of course, the other thing you can do is patreon.com/Choralosophy and join there for as little as $3 a month. You can now get the free Substack newsletter and choose to support financially through that as well. So you don't feel like you got to do Patreon and Substack. I'm just giving off options of how to support the show. So thank you all so much. And of course, like always, smash the like button, the subscribe button, the share button, all of those things, and join the conversation. Thanks, everybody.